Cyberpunk 2077 released December 2020, and to say it dropped like a nuclear bomb would be underselling. The hype around the game was explosive, and the devs coming off their Witcher 3 success were radiating positivity and credibility. So naturally, when the issues with the title arose and the hype turned to ash, many people felt betrayed. That led to rampant emotions, which frankly make it extremely difficult to this day to know if Cyberpunk 2077 is actually a good game, if the improvements made over the year have put it in a better spot, and if we're getting any expansions at all. So in this video, I'll be re-reviewing Cyberpunk, going over what's changed, where the game is currently, if you should play it, and what we can expect in the future. Specifically, during a group CD Projekt Red earnings call, a ton of information on the future of the company was discussed, including a next-gen Witcher and the future of Cyberpunk 2077. So duck, cover, and let's begin. A quick synopsis is that Cyberpunk 2077 is an open-world first-person RPG based in a dystopian future where the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer, where your soul can be destroyed, cloned, and placed in a husk of a... Okay, this just sounds like the present-time real world. Look, just think GTA with RPG elements and a focus on atmosphere. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Cyberpunk 2077 is a AAA game and thus had access to a large cache of resources. That means that no matter how buggy or unplayable it may have been on old generation consoles, it still had award-winning storytelling, voice acting, music, sound, and a rich lore-filled universe to immerse yourself in. Those elements have remained the same. If you're a fan of the dystopian or cyberpunk, you'll love the atmosphere of 2077. You'll drive around Night City while it rains and think, wow, this is an absolutely incredibly beautiful and immersive game. Unfortunately, that was the extent of a lot of people's joy, specifically those with lower-end PCs or consoles. The game released in a buggy state for most and a downright unplayable one for some. I was lucky enough to play on a 3080 and could experience this game how it was more or less intended. For the re-review, I played on the exact same PC, but I did try booting it up on the PlayStation 4 and 5. As of right now, even with the multiple patches and fixes, I would recommend you stay far away from 2077 on old gen systems. We all just have to accept that this game should not have been released on them in the first place. They're in a better place, but the experience is still horrible. That being said, on PlayStation 5, even without the promised next-gen upgrade, the experience is a lot better. After 11 major patches over the year, at least now you can experience the game without fatal issues. Though during my PS5 playtime, I experienced multiple bugs. For example, my character standing up while driving and NPCs clipping into things. The console didn't break, but my personal immersion did. It seems that on both PC and current gen consoles that Cyberpunk has been downgraded in order to increase the frame rate. Slowdowns occurred because the game would try to load in too many assets on the screen like vehicles and NPCs. So a quick fix must have been to simply lower the amount of objects that load in. It works, but it's a crude solution. The system itself seems to be downright busted at times. If you rapidly look around, for example, NPCs and vehicles will unload when off screen, but different ones will load back in when you're in the same view. During the day, sometimes the city feels empty. And if you look far enough in the distance, there'll still be GIF-like placeholder vehicles and NPCs. The NPCs themselves still have, at times, janky AI. Most of the time they're smart enough to flank you and shoot you in the back. Other times you'll see two NPCs walking into each other. Even though the jank is far between, it does break immersion when it happens. So when it comes to negatives and lingering issues in Cyberpunk 2077, the assets loading and the NPC AI are the worst offenders. Now, I mentioned bugs, but I'm happy to say that the game feels like it's in a much better place in that regard, especially on PC where I experienced a whopping total of 1 visual bug during 20 hours of playtime. This is conjecture to the nth degree, but I actually do recommend PC players check out Cyberpunk 2077 if all that was holding them back was the technical issues. That being said, everyone's experience could vary based on their hardware. If your issue was that you were promised and expected a lot more, like branching life path outcomes or wall running for example, and the game didn't deliver for you, then I'm sorry to say none of that has been changed. In fact, the only content that's been added a year later is a car, 2 jackets, and a Johnny Silverhand skin, so basically cosmetics. CD Projekt Red have updated their roadmap, and as you can see, all of their actual content will be in 2022 and beyond, including the next gen console update which was promised early 2021. Don't fret though, CD Projekt Red definitely don't plan on abandoning this title, and I'll explain more about the future later based on a recent group's earning call. If you want to add to the experience right now, there are a host of interesting mods on nexusmods.com and Steam. I run through a few of the best on my channel, including upgrading cars and even making characters nude. So what do you get if you buy 2077 right now? Well, you get a tight experience if you follow the mainline missions and avoid any side content, roughly 6 hours to get past the prologue and massively open the world up to you. From there are main missions that take roughly 20 more hours. The story is memorable, enjoyable, and worth the price of entry. However, it's the side and off the beaten path content that makes 2077 shine, as well as add hundreds of hours to the experience. If you take the time to really absorb what the game has to offer, you'll be rewarded. The act of simply exploring will have you running into side events that you can choose to interact with, like store robberies or cyber psycho attacks. Some of the rarest weapons are locked behind non-story related content. Like Ryzen says here, at this point, hating on Cyberpunk is a bandwagon. The game is jam-packed with entertainment, and as soon as you pass the prologue, your phone gets blown up. You can't drive for a minute without a fixer calling you about a job or a new car they have for sale. You'll be initially overwhelmed with the possibilities, but just breathe. Do things at your own pace and in the order you want. You have the freedom to do so. Right now, on Steam, the game has been flooded with positive reviews. Over 24,000 new, very positive reviews to be clear at this point of recording. This means something. It means that not only are people jumping back in and finding the game in a good place, they're enjoying it. Reading through them, the common theme is, despite any issues, they're all having a blast. Funnily enough, I'm seeing a lot of playtimes of over 150 hours dropping reviews, and that speaks louder than words. I even saw a negative review from someone that had around 500 hours in the game. Like most reviewers, I see little fault in the combat system. Even now, I'm itching to try new builds. My first character invested in reflex, cool, and tech. He functioned like a sneaky pistol-based hitman. This is the only game in recent memory that makes pistols damn badass. I transitioned to pure melee during my second playthrough, and I had to wipe the blood off my forehead at times. I felt that sucked into the experience. But after trying out a shotgun carved from a single piece of metal, I'm dying to attempt a strength annihilation build. You feel the impact of weapons, you feel powerful, and at times, you feel like a god. Not to mention the stealthy netrunner kinds of builds where you can disable cameras, force enemies to kill each other or even themselves. There's a build for everyone, and if you want to see just how deep the rabbit hole goes, check out my build video below. You truly feel tiny in a huge city, and by picking the nomad life path, your character experiences that sense of awe with you at the start of the game. 2077 also has multiple endings, one of which is locked behind the right choices, so you might find yourself playing through multiple times to try out different builds and endings. I admit the first time I played through, I got the pseudo worst ending and I felt truly unsettled at not only the outcome, but the combination of sound design, pacing, and storytelling. I don't think a game has ever made me feel that way, and it was fantastic. This is a very adult game and the themes are dark, and that can't be overstated. There were points I felt truly disturbed by the things happening, not a vomit kind of way, but in the realization that this kind of darkness exists in the world. That not everything is a happy rainbow unicorn candy fart. Like I stated, if the only reason you avoided this game was because of the negative press around bugs and glitches, the game is in a good enough state now that I recommend trying it out on PC. If you're a current gen console owner, I'd recommend waiting until the next gen patch. If you don't plan on getting a PC or a current gen console, remain far away from Cyberpunk 2077. If you're easily sucked away from an experience by the occasional disruption, Cyberpunk is not for you. It's a massive open world, and like Skyrim, it's gonna always have bugs and jank. If you're a fan of the cyberpunk or dystopian theme, RPGs, open worlds, strong narratives, or even just Keanu Reeves, this is the game for you and well worth the now half-price entry point. I'll reiterate what I said in my first review. Cyberpunk is imperfect perfection. Cyberpunk is an amazing game with a few hiccups here and there. It's ambitious, heart-pounding, and truly worth a look. Now, we talked about where the game is, but what about its future? It had been relative radio silence from CD Projekt Red when it comes to Cyberpunk 2077, with their latest roadmap dropping covertly, to say the least, which is no surprise considering it wasn't exactly crowd-pleasing news. It showed that 2020 and 2021 was focusing on the 12 major patches, and early 2022 will focus on the promised next-gen patch. However, recently there was a group CD Projekt Red earnings call which we'll run through now. Let's start with this, a visual representation of the development team's staff allocation. In December 2020, the majority of staff was focused around supporting 2077, but as time shifted to the end of 2021, around a third are now allocated specifically to the Cyberpunk expansion. This kind of shift heavily indicates they intend to fight through the controversy and continue the plan of servicing the game for years to come. In fact, during the call, they confirmed that they intend to work intensely on the expansions and they plan to release it end of 2022. Also, when asked if they would raise the price of the game, they obviously said no, but they also added that extra content will come free. So keep this in mind when talking about DLC or expansions. The questions were asked by whale investors, the guys that can pump and dump shares like nobody's business, so it's in CD Projekt Red's interest to make those guys happy, yet they took the side of the consumer. CD Projekt Red went on to say that they would not include microtransactions of any kind. So guys, if you own a copy of Cyberpunk, it seems that's all you'll be paying for the foreseeable future, unless of course they start working on larger scale paid DLC. Back to the new projects, CD Projekt Red are working on a next-gen Witcher game, as well as a Gwent-related project, as we can see, all of which are drastically outmanned by the Cyberpunk-related workforce. Moving down the slide, we see that the next-gen upgrade is set for Q1 of 2022, and the Witcher Complete Edition, which comes with visual upgrades, all expansions, and extra items inspired by the Netflix series, is coming in Q2 of 2022, which I'm definitely going to get on PS5. So, thanks for watching guys. What did you think? Did you pick up Cyberpunk at release? Are you jumping back in now, or perhaps trying it for the first time? Let me know below. I'll be continuing to cover Cyberpunk over its lifespan, as well as the latest AAA RPGs like Starfield, Mass Effect and Dragon Age 4, and Tiny Tina's Wonderland, so be sure to keep your eyes peeled to Slash Dantics. Ciao friends.